Okay, so in this episode we're going to look at bar chords, and specifically this requires a large amount of strength in the left hand or the fretting hand. In particular, we're going to focus on the index finger strength. And what I mean by that is, for example, last week I told you about muffled strings, where we simply just rest the finger over the strings without fretting the actual notes and stroke them as if we were stroking a chord, thus creating a very percussive, muffled sound. This time, I want you to just briefly take your index finger and I want you to basically squeeze down on the strings until you fret them. And I want you to do this in such a way and be conscious of what the thumb is doing behind the fretboard. So if I just get behind, if I get an angle rather, just so I can show you what I mean. I know it's not exactly ideal, but the thumb ideally wants to be exactly behind. It wants to be behind that index finger, supporting it and pressing it down. Second of all, when playing bar chords, I also want you to be aware of using the second finger to also, there'll be times when you can use the second finger to support that index finger to get the fret. And I want you to have a go at simply trying to just basically sound each note of the chord there, try and get them ringing through in a way. So as you can hear, there's no real buzzing noises, anything like that, meaning that the actual strings are being fretted. And this in effect is called a bar. This will be very useful when looking at the shapes we're going to look at in this lesson today. In the meantime, let's make our way to the drawing board. Okay, so in the first two episodes of the practice corner, we have looked at open, major and minor chords. And as a brief recap, these are called open chords because there are open strings that resonate, or unfretted strings rather, that resonate through the chord upon striking the strings with the strumming hand. These in particular were the open major chords, which were C major, D major, E major, G major and A major. And then last week we looked at the open minor chords, which were D minor, E minor and that of A minor. However, you might be thinking now, well, that's great and all that, but alphabetically at least, where are F and B for that matter? Well, to fill in the picture of that, we now need to look at the penultimate form of chord we're going to look at in this lesson series, and that's bar chords. And bar chords give us access to F major, F minor, and B major and B minor. But they also give us access to C, D, E, G, and A major, and they also give us access to D minor, E minor, and A minor. So how can this be? Well, let's go to the practice corner and have a look at how to play bar chords. Okay, so let's look at some bar chord shapes. So the first one we're going to look at is called the C shape. And this is because after fretting all your fingers on the fretboard, the open C chord we looked at in a previous episode of the practice corner is fretted only further down the neck, with the index finger or the barring finger acting as a sort of pseudo nut, if you like, in a way. This will be clearer when we have a look at one. So in this one, we're going to look at the D major chord played like it was a C. And how you do that is you, in effect, take your index finger and do what we did before, like in the prerequisites section of the video. Only we do this on the second fret of all 6 strings. Then our remaining 3 fingers are then employed in the following manner. So we take the pinky finger and place this on the 5th fret of the A string. We then take the Guess Heidi here in the video. Cat's shouting at the minute. She says hi. We then take our third finger and place this on the 4th fret of the D string. Then our remaining finger, the second finger, goes on the 3rd fret of the B string. Individually, when we play this, it should sound like this. And this, of course, sounds like D major. The original open D major will sound like this. The Barre chord version will sound like this. Once again, pay attention to buzzing strings, that kind of thing, as you just heard. There's a good example to get some strength in that index finger. You will also notice in the corner here where I'm pointing, you can also play that by only barring the top 3 strings there. However, this is personal preference. I prefer barring all 6 strings in a way, really, because it allows you to play that top string as well. You can play that. I know I've marked it as an X, but I do highly encourage you to not play that for C shapes. But if you do manage to hit that in a way, don't worry, that's fair game for now. The important thing is to get that index finger fretting all chords without each string buzzing. You want them all resonating. Our next shape is going to be the E major shape, and surprise, surprise, much like the C major shape, this basically looks like an E when fretted, only with the index finger acting as, again, the pseudo nut. So like we did in the prerequisites, we're going to play the F major here. So we want you to place your index finger across all 6 strings on the 1st fret. You then take your 3rd finger and place it on the 3rd fret of the A string, and directly under that you place your pinky finger on the same fret of the D string. Then you take your remaining finger and you place this on the 2nd fret of the G string. And individually this will sound like this. And this is F major. To get of course, remember as well that takes the shape of the E chord, which is 1 fret down to get you F. To get the minor equivalent, surprise, surprise, we just take E minor and do the same thing. So we fret the F major, but this time we take the 2nd finger and we remove that and we place this on top of the index finger to give us extra support when playing that bar chord. And this will sound, of course, more sad because it's a sadder sounding chord, but it'll be the F minor equivalent. And that is F minor, or the E minor shape. Our next shape is very similar to that of the C major shape. It's not that common, but it is worth being aware of, and this is, of course, the G shape. We're going to have a look at this in the form of A major. So what I mean by that is, if again we take our trusted index finger here, and by now if you've been practicing, there should be a bit more strength in that finger now, really. Eventually over time you'll gain strength in that with more practice you have and develop calluses. So I want you to again place this on the 2nd fret, all 6 strings. Then your remaining fingers are going to be employed in a much similar way as if you're fretting a normal G chord, with the index finger again acting as the pseudo nut. And this means your 3rd finger goes on the 5th fret of the E string, your 2nd finger goes on the 4th fret of the A string, and your pinky finger then goes on the 5th fret of the E string. And the remaining strings are, of course, fretted by your index finger. And this should sound like this. I beg your pardon? And this is A major, which would sound like this if it was played as the open chord. as the bar chord in the G form. Sonically, they may sing slightly different, much similar to when we did this with the example using the C shape and comparing that to D, but the notes are more or less the same. We're fretting the same notes, but some are more slightly higher than others, but the notes belong to that chord, and this gives you more access to sonically different sounding chords belonging to the same family. And this is again something to be aware of when playing bar chords. Our final two shapes, again, are much similar to that of the E shape and E minor shape, and this is of course the A shape and the A minor shape. And the A shape is going to give us access to the B major chord. And we do this again by simply taking our index finger, placing this on the second fret of all 6 strings. And this acts as our nut, or at least our pseudo nut as we're calling it. Only this time for the major shape, we now take our third finger and we basically bar this as a second bar over the 4th fret of the D, G and B strings. And if I've fretted this properly, it should sound like this when we play each string. And this is B major. To get the B minor, we simply take the A minor shape and we do what we did before with the E minor shape, and changing that to the E major shape is we just slide the A minor shape along the 2 frets and keep the index finger fretted along the second fret of the top 5 strings. You can play the 6th string again, but in this case I'm going to demonstrate that you can use the second finger to mute the top string whilst fretting the remainder of the chord, or barring the remainder of the chord. So you bar the top 5 strings there, you rest the top of the index finger on the E string to mute it. You then take your third finger and index and forefinger and place this on the 4th fret of the D and G strings respectively. And your remaining finger is going to fret the 3rd fret of the B string. And this is B minor. When played individually, each string will sound like this. And it is worth noting that on the 7th fret, if you take the E minor shape and place the on the 7th fret, so the barring finger is on the 7th fret, and strum through, you'll get B minor as well. But did you notice this high note ringing through? Again, this is something to just be sonically aware of when moving forward and developing your own playing. Let's make our way to the drawing board to discuss how we can use bar chords effectively using an example. Okay, so using now what we have learned about bar chords and relating this back to what we'd learned in the last episode of the practice corner when we studied rhythm, how can we make bar chords a bit more interesting? Well, we can now play this passage. This passage features on a fair few tracks I can think of, at least off the top of my head. I know it features in a John Lennon song. I think it may be Imagine, I'm not quite sure, but it might be. But more recently, I've been looking at more of Oasis in particular, and Don't Look Back in Anger features this in the bridge section, which we're going to have a look at in the practice corner. But I want you to imagine, if there was ever a lack of a better title there as well, I've just realised. I want you to think of or imagine 2 guitar players playing now, guitar 1 and guitar 2. And they're playing these chords here, which requires bar chords. This is optional. You can play an open chord for this, or you can play a bar chord, or one guitar player can play one and the other to get some variation. I want you to now think about one guitar player playing this particular strumming pattern. Ta, ta, ka, 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 ta, over and over again. How can we make these bar chords more interesting for a player? So the rhythm below, you may think might be a bit boring, and indeed it is. It's only 3 attacks after all, so 1, 2, tack, 4, tack, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So you may be going, oh, that's a bit boring really with the bar chords. But what if I was to tell you, you could really accentuate that with just one strum to stand out in amongst all of this rhythm here? Well, to understand that more, we're going to learn how to play rhythm stabs. And this is a heavy feature of Don't Look Back in Anger. So let's make our way back to the practice corner to discuss how this can be done. Okay, so if we were to demonstrate what we just discussed on the drawing board using bar chords and lead open chords, and imagine guitar 1 strumming that pattern we discussed using the split measure of F to F minor to C, we will get a pattern that will sound a lot like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now if we were to have a look at what guitar 2 could be doing, if we were to accentuate each chord change there with one simple strum, but use string muffling, we would get a sort of rhythm stab, if you like. And this would sound a lot like this, if you can imagine that being underlaid over that at 80 BPM. This would sound like this. 3, 4. So this is very simple yet very effective. It means guitar 2 is finding their own rhythm sound over the top of that backdrop of a nice sort of bled in kind of guitar progression, if you like, really. If you take a closer listen to Don't Look Back in Anger, in particular the bridge section, which features that progression, slip inside summertime's in bloom, that kind of bit there, you will hear that. You'll hear a guitar doing the basic strumming and rhythm, and then you will hear guitar 2 coming in as a stab guitar. It's very subtle but very effective. And how I'm doing that is basically what we did before at the beginning of the lesson, but using a bar chord, is you muffle the strings during the strum. So again, if I was to just angle this again in such a way, you release the pressure, you strum, release, strum, release, strum, release, and that muffles the strings immediately. So if you just pay attention to what my left hand is doing when I'm strumming, you'll see that release there to give you a muffled string when strumming. So it's like, and this works far more effectively for bar chords than it does for open chords. You can do it with open chords, like a C major open chord will sound like this. So again, you hear some strings ringing through, and this is because they are unfretted, and will give you a resonating kind of effect throughout. This is not necessarily a bad thing. Again, it's just preference to that of the musician making the music. And again, this is something you can experiment with, perhaps with a backing track. Maybe take Don't Look Back in Anger itself and maybe act as the third or fourth guitar, messing around with the stab technique. Or perhaps if you have a friend, you could perhaps take it in turns doing guitar 1, guitar 2, like rhythm sort of exchanges if you like, and maybe it's playing off beat. It's whatever you fancy in a way, really. You know, it's all about being creative and telling a story rhythmically as well as melodically. Anyway, let's make our way back to the drawing board to conclude this week's lesson. So really experimenting with that rhythmically can lead to some really interesting, great things, especially if you're playing along with a backing track, or perhaps you have a friend who's also learning guitar with you. You can really sort of play off each other rhythmically. Maybe if you have a lead guitar player who's also doing something as well over that. Indeed, if you listen to that song in particular, there's a lot going on, and you can the stab guitar parts are very, very prominent in my opinion, and it's just a simple stroke that really makes it stand out in amongst this rhythm section going on, providing this sort of wall of sound, if you like, in a way, really. And it's important to understand that rhythm can play off each other. You don't particularly need lead parts, although they are nice to hear in there. But here we have two simple rhythm parts sort of playing off each other and are quite noticeable individually, but collectively they add to the story of the song as it evolves. Yeah, I do hope you've enjoyed this lesson. Next time I do a lesson, I'm not sure when I'm going to get the chance to do it, but again, I'll try and keep it weekly if I can. We're going to look at a sort of similar type of thing to a bar chord, very similar to a bar chord, but neither major or minor. And we're going to focus more heavily on more power chords, which is useful for rock as well. One thing to know about bar chords is that they're also useful for rock music as well. So that's something to bear in mind when moving forward. But if you've liked the episode, please consider giving a like or a comment or sharing it with a friend or something like that to get people into guitar and music again. Or if you're really that way inclined, give me a subscription and more of these lessons will follow. Anyway, guys, thank you very much, and I'll see you later.